Yeah, so 2 Samuel 6, again, David gathered all the choice men of Israel, 30,000. And David arose and went with all the people who were with him from Baale, I think that can be Bala or Baale, Judah, to bring up from there the ark of God, which is called by the name of Yahweh of hosts, who dwells between the cherubim. So if you remember in 1 Samuel, the ark of God was captured, and he had to get it. When the Philistines, they captured the ark of God, because you remember that 2 Samuel was like 4 or 5, something like that, where the ark of God gets captured by the Philistines, and then they take it away. But then God, like the god Dagon, and they take it in the temple, and then it's fallen down on its face, and then they move it to different places, and those cities get like plagued, revealing this God really is powerful. And then they end up, remember, sending it back. Remember the whole cows, the milk mother cows, separating the mother cows away from the calves, and then but then somehow those calves just go straight in a certain direction to the Israelite side, all that stuff. And then the ark of God, it remained in that area. Well, initially, when it goes to the Israel side, even some people in Israel, they're not careful. They like just peek in, and they just like don't have reverence for the ark of God, the presence of God. And so many people die, and then they finally move it to like a city with a priest. So that's why here you see in verse 3, so they set the ark of God on a new cart and brought it out of the house of Abinadab. So that Abinadab is shown in 1 Samuel 7:1, which was on the hill, and Uzzah and Ahio, the sons of Abinadab, drove the new cart, and they brought it out of the house of Abinadab, which was on the hill, accompanying the ark of God, and Ahio went before the ark. So remember, we saw David establishing Jerusalem as the capital city, where he would dwell, his palace and everything. So that's gotten pretty established, David, his kingship getting established. But now, this very important part, God's presence, the Ark of the Covenant, getting that into the city, he's wanting to do that and get this area, this city, Jerusalem, to be the place where the Ark of God is going to be. And so they put it on a new cart. And right away, if you know the Bible, again, this comes in. If you know the Bible, them just putting it on a new cart, this is problematic. So originally, back in Eli's time, Eli the priest, they would have done it correctly with the poles. So you guys probably all know this already, but you guys see the screen?
God requires that the priest to be carrying the Ark of the Covenant on the poles instead of using a ox cart.
Yeah, so do you see the image here? Poles, they're supposed to carry it on poles. So this was the law. Like Numbers 4:15 just tells us. I mean, even the whole design of the ark, I mean, they're poles. They're supposed to be poles. I don't know if the Philistines pulled out the poles. I don't know what happened, but it's just put on a cart. And it tells us here, verse 3, that they put it on a new cart. So they just switched carts. So it's tricky here. Do they not know the law? Or do they know it, but they're just ignoring it? They forgot about it? We just can't be sure. But it is definitely a neglect of the law, because you're supposed to know these very, very important laws about God's presence, the ark. But you just put it on a new cart. And then 4, and they brought it out of the house of Abinadab, which was on the hill, accompanying the ark of God. And Ahio went before the ark. Then, verse 5, David and all the house of Israel were celebrating before Yahweh with all kinds of instruments of fir wood on the harps, lyres, tambourines, castanets, and on cymbals. So you can try to picture this, okay? They're celebrating, they're worshiping with all these musical instruments. And obviously, based on these instruments, we know that this wouldn't have been a quiet, mood, which that's that, certain occasions, certain situations. It's a more quiet atmosphere. But it's very, very obvious that with these instruments and the whole language of celebrating, I mean, we can know it was loud, it was just exciting, and they're celebrating, they're worshiping. It's that kind of atmosphere. And so they're rejoicing about God's presence now coming in to this very same city where David has established his throne and the whole palace kind of thing. So there's all this rejoicing about God's presence. In verse 6, and when they came to Nachan's threshing floor, Uzzah put out his hand to the ark of God and took hold of it, for the oxen stumbled. So he sees the oxen stumbling. So the oxen, I guess, pulling this ark on a cart, and the oxen stumbles. And so if the oxen stumbles and falls, it's going to be a catastrophe, this whole presence of God. So Uzzah put out his hand to stabilize it. And verse 7, then the anger of Yahweh burned against Uzzah, and God struck him there for his error, and he died there by the ark of God. So he's just dead on the spot. He laid hold of the ark. You're not supposed to touch it like this. But he put out his hand to stabilize the ark of God, and the anger of God aroused, and he struck him, and he killed him there. And so, when you're in this atmosphere of celebration, worship, just excitement, just picture that atmosphere. And this one man, he puts out his hand, and then it's almost like seeing someone with a heart attack or something, where they just fall on the floor, they drop dead. Well, obviously, the whole atmosphere is, it's done, as we can all picture. In a moment, like probably maybe some people yelled or something, but immediately, like within a few seconds, it's all quieted down, and they see this Uzzah who's just dead on the floor. And there probably was like report, he did, lay his hand on the ark of God, and basically God killed him. Verse 8, and David became angry because of Yahweh's outbreak against Uzzah, and he called the name of the place Perez Uzzah to this day. Okay, I want to make sure we're very careful here. Verse 8, it says David became angry because of Yahweh's outbreak against Uzzah. Now, I think I have heard maybe some pastors, at least a pastor, I think, saying that David got angry with God. Does it say that? No, it doesn't. It says he got angry. It doesn't say he got angry against God. And there's a big, big, big difference. David, he gets angry because of this situation. What happened is frustration and anger. Everything's ruined. And this man who probably was the fact that he reached out his hand to stabilize the ark, he cared for the presence of God. He had a good intention. So he was probably a good man, but he got killed. And so there's frustration and there's anger. But I just want us to be very careful. It doesn't say David got angry at God. I think one of the reasons is because it's something that is pretty common, I think, sadly, unfortunately, in modern day Christendom, where like, depending on the circle you're around, the kind of church and the circle you're around, where people sometimes, depending on the circle, they hear the language, oh, I'm angry at God, or that kind of sinfulness, that kind of sin. It's like they're so used to hearing that kind of thing, that's just so natural that they kind of see this that way. But I just need to emphasize this because we live in a time period, in a context with the Christendom where this kind of really like terrible, bad thing, this idea of getting angry at God is so common that people so easily have this kind of thought and have this kind of attitude against God, where they're angry at God. But may we know that I can't recall any passage, any incident where a saint gets angry at God. I can't recall a single one. All throughout the Old or New Testament. It's so far away from what we have in the Bible. And let's just say there's an incident where somebody gets angry at God sinfully. That's just way out there, absolutely wrong. Very obvious and clear. See, remember Job. When he loses, God takes away everything he has, including 10 of his children. He worships God. He submits to him. Even Eli or Eli, the priest, when God pronounces judgment on his house, he knows better, and he says, may God do what pleases him. May God do what's right before him. See, they have a proper understanding of God. They don't have this puny little God that's like some grandpa or some Santa Claus or whatever. They have a proper view of God. And when you have a correct understanding of God, proper view of God, you're going to be so far away from, quote unquote, getting angry at God. And that would be the case with David too. He knows better. He does get angry at the situation, but he doesn't say he got angry at God. So I just hope that's really clear. And, okay, next issue. Immediately, a lot of Christians would think, and it's understandable, wait, Uzzah had a good intention. I mean, he was reaching out his hand. I mean, it's not like he was just like flippantly, just playing around with God's ark or something. He had a good intention and he was trying to stabilize it. But how can God do this? Why would he do this? Well, because, see, if they obeyed God from the beginning of how they're supposed to carry the ark, God made it clear already in his law. The Levites, is it Levites or the priests? One or the other. They're supposed to carry the ark, and only they are supposed to carry the ark, and you're not supposed to touch it. That's why they have poles. So when you start disobeying God's word, you end up you end up being in a situation where you end up sinning. So remember, just a couple days ago, remember Saul, 1 Samuel 28. Remember how I made the point about, according to the law, they were supposed to execute all mediums, witches, mediums, necromancer, whatever. That was the law. You're not supposed to let them live. But because Saul let them live and just cast them out of the land, see, that's not obedience. You're supposed to execute them. But he just kind of shoot them out, kick them out. Later on, he ends up looking for one of them. If he obeyed from the beginning, he wouldn't even have the opportunity to sin like that. Things would have been much less bad. But he ended up where he was. So, if they followed God's law from the beginning, this situation wouldn't have even occurred. And so, that's the problem. You sin by not obeying God, and that's why they ended up encountering this situation. And so, when he reaches out his hand and touches the ark of God, yeah, he gets killed. And God even warned about this in like Numbers 4, I think, where like, when they were taking care of the ark, not just the ark, but all kinds of things in the temple, whether the altar, the showbread table, that, all kinds of things in the temple, the priests are the only ones that can see them. No one ever sees them. No one else ever sees them. And they're supposed to cover it so that when the Levites carry those things, they never get to see them. Even the Levites didn't get to see them. But God warned in those passages, he warned about death. Like, I think it's just good to just read it. Numbers 4:4. This is the service of the sons of Kohath in the tent of meeting relating to the most holy things. When the camp prepares to journey, Aaron and his sons, priests, shall come, and they shall take down the covering veil and cover the ark of the testimony with it. Then they shall put on it a covering of badger skins, and spread over that a cloth entirely of blue, and they shall insert its poles. So did you know they weren't even supposed to see this? They're supposed to cover it up. And then on the table of showbread, they shall spread a blue cloth and put it on the dishes, and then pans, bowls, pitchers of pouring. Showbread shall be on it. They shall spread over them a scarlet cloth and cover the same with a covering of badger skins. So all this covering, and then the next one cover them. And then verse 15, and when Aaron and his sons have finished covering the sanctuary and all the furnishings of the sanctuary, when the camp is set to go, then the sons of Kohath, the Levites, shall come to carry them, but they shall not touch any holy thing lest they die. So there's touching there lest they die. And then like verse 17, 18, and Yahweh spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, do not cut off the tribes of the families of the Kohathites and among the Levites, but do this in regard to them, that they may live and not die when they approach the most holy things. Aaron and his sons shall go in and appoint each of them to his service and his task, but they shall not go in to watch while the holy things are being covered, lest they die. So even watching, they don't even see it and the touching and stuff. So it's already made very, very clear. And God is very reasonable. He makes it so that the situation is where they carry it in pole, so there's not a situation where you even have to touch it or anything like that. So yeah, that's that part. Now, real quick. Okay, there are some things where God is very strict and clear on, where if you even violate it in any way, like this situation, you're dead. Versus, can you think of any other situation, any law, anything where God is lenient? God may give exceptions, he's lenient, he's not so strict. Do you recall anything?
I do.
You said you do or you don't?
I don't.
Okay. So remember, just a couple weeks ago or so, remember at 1 Samuel 21, David, he goes to where the priest is, where kind of the tent is, and he needs food. And the law clearly said, the showbread, only the priests eat. Remember that? But the priest gives that showbread to David. God doesn't kill him. As a matter of fact, Jesus affirms that was fine. That was fine to do. So even though the law clearly says the showbread is only for the priest, that priest, in love for his neighbor, gave that bread to David. It was fine. So that's just one example, but there are other examples. Like if you become familiar with the Bible, like, well, in different places, like I can recall there's a situation where, like, in 2 Chronicles, when, like, for example, I'll just read it for you, like King Hezekiah. So this is a time of like Passover. This is 2 Chronicles 30 verse 15. Then they slaughtered the Passover lambs on the 14th day of the second month. The priests and the Levites were ashamed and sanctified themselves and brought the burnt offerings to the house of Yahweh. They stood in their place according to their custom, according to the law of Moses, the man of God. The priests sprinkled the blood received from the hand of the Levites, for there were many in the assembly who had... Okay, verse 17. For there were many in the assembly who had not sanctified themselves. So the law was, if you're not sanctified, if you're not clean, you can't eat it. When you eat the Passover stuff, you're supposed to be clean. But there are some who had not sanctified themselves. Therefore, the Levites had charge of the slaughter of the Passover lambs for everyone who was not clean, to sanctify them to the Lord. For a multitude of the people, many from Ephraim, Manasseh, Issachar, and Zebulun, had not cleansed themselves. Yet they ate the Passover contrary to what was written. But Hezekiah prayed for them, saying, May the good Lord, may the good Yahweh provide atonement for everyone who prepares his heart to seek God, Yahweh God of his fathers, though he is not cleansed according to the purification of the sanctuary. And Yahweh listened to Hezekiah and healed the people. So this is just one example, again, where according to the law, you need to be clean to eat the Passover, but there are some that were not clean. And Hezekiah prays, Lord, be merciful in this situation. And God healed, and it was fine. So you have to become familiar with the Bible to know there are some areas, some things, with some situations where it's very black and white clear. But other situations where God seems to be like lenient, and it's understandable in that situation. Like, again, David's situation, he's being chased and he doesn't have any food. It's a special situation. It's not like the priests are like, hey, the law says only the priest can have it, but hey, I'll just give whoever some showbread. No. If it was like that, maybe he would have gotten killed, or at least disciplined or something. But it's a special situation with David, and so it's understandable, and so there's that. So yeah, David, he's angry with the situation. And then verse 9, David was afraid. He feared Yahweh that day. And he said, how can the ark of Yahweh come to me? So David would not move the ark of Yahweh with him into the city of David, but David took it aside into the house of Obed-Edom the Gittite. The ark of Yahweh remained in the house of Obed-Edom the Gittite 3 months, and Yahweh blessed Obed-Edom and all his household. And I forgot to point out one more thing. This is pretty important, okay? You notice, remember, again, the atmosphere. Chapter 6, verse 5, when David and the house of Israel, they were celebrating with all these instruments, and there would have been probably dancing, because later on we're going to see dancing. Just celebration, singing, worship, and all that. This is important. You notice how that doesn't get God to overlook the sin? And like when Uzzah, he reaches out his hand, he touches the ark of God, God doesn't go, well, these guys are all worshiping me, the atmosphere is all whatever, so I'm not going to ruin the party. I can't ruin the party. It's going to mess up the whole whatever. So I'll just overlook it. You notice he doesn't do that. It doesn't matter what kind of atmosphere it is. It's not going to get God to budge in any way when it comes to certain things, certain issues. And I have to go into this because, basically, this is kind of related, so if you go to Isaiah 1, I think this is just so relevant that I have to just go to it, but in Isaiah 1, with the whole issue of worship and disobedient sin going on, because you know the situation here, where the whole atmosphere is like a worshipful atmosphere with singing and worship going on, maybe even dancing going on. But then out of nowhere, God struck this person that sinned and ruined the whole atmosphere, that whole thing. So basically the issue of worship along with sin going on. If you go to Isaiah 1, let's just go to verse 10. I would like to go from verse 1 all the way here, but just with time, I'll just go to verse 10. Hear the word of Yahweh, you rulers of Sodom. Give ear to the law of our God, you people of Gomorrah. By the way, just real quick, guys, this is, of course, Israel. This is Israel, okay? This is not Sodom and Gomorrah. Sodom and Gomorrah was destroyed a long time ago. But basically, God is calling Israel out, the leaders of Israel, as rulers of Sodom and the people of Gomorrah. He's likening them to Sodom and Gomorrah. Now, let me just be real. Our God hasn't changed. He can do this exact same thing. Our God hasn't changed, okay? There are professing churches today where God would say the same thing. Hey, you church, you whatever Baptist church, you whatever Presbyterian church, he would call them the Church of Sodom. You elders of Sodom, you pastors of Sodom, you Church of Gomorrah, which would be considered all, unloving, whatever, all that foolishness. This is our God. Okay? Now, because of their condition, where he's calling them out. Verse 11. To what purpose is the multitude of your sacrifices to me? Says Yahweh. I have had enough of burnt offerings of rams and the fat of fed cattle. I have no pleasure in the blood of bulls or of lambs or goats. When you come to appear before me, who has required this from your hand? This trampling of my courts. Stop bringing vain or meaningless sacrifices. Your incense is an abomination to me. The new moons, the Sabbaths, and the calling of assemblies. I cannot endure iniquity in the sacred meeting. Your new moons and your appointed feasts, my soul hates. They have become a burden to me. I am weary of bearing them. When you spread out your hands, you do that when you pray. When you spread out your hands, I will hide my eyes from you. Even though you make many prayers, you see the parallelism? The spreading out of hands is a posture of prayer. That's how they prayed. even though you make many prayers, I will not hear. Your hands are full of blood. Wash yourselves, make yourselves clean, put away the evil of your doings from before my eyes. Cease to the evil, learn to do good, seek justice, rebuke the oppressor, defend the fatherless, plead for the widow. Okay, so the situation is this. Israel, their condition was so bad, where there's immorality, injustice, wickedness, corruption in the government, religious system, all that stuff. Their condition was so bad that God is saying, your worship, it's disgusting to me. Now think about how relevant this is, guys. Every Sunday morning in this country, there are thousands and thousands and thousands of churches that get together in a building. They have their church service. This exact same thing is going on. Many times, just the previous day, they're watching things that are absolutely detestable to God, with pagan TV shows and all kinds of things where they blaspheme Jesus' name, and it's just all fun and entertaining and all that stuff. Whatever kind of sin, just living in a wickedness. And then on Sunday, they come to this church building and they're like worshiping God, lifting up their hands and, oh, we worship you, God, maybe even, jumping up and down, whatever. Look at this. God doesn't say, well, they're all worshiping me and so I'm pleased and so I'm just going to overlook their sin. No, there's nothing of that. There's no such thing. I mean, look at this. Isaiah 1. And you see this all over the Bible and the prophets. It's so, so relevant. But guys, think about this. When in those churches, when they're like singing with all the music and all the lights and all the, all the loud music, whatever, and all that stuff, would they ever think that this is what God is thinking about them? No. Never. When in actuality, God is saying, your worship is disgusting to me. Did you see this? Isaiah 1? That's what he says. So, our God is not a God who is like, well, all this worshipful atmosphere and singing and music and stuff, I'm going to be nice, or like, I'm just going to like overlook their sin or become lenient. It's not like that. Just like how God struck Uzzah, like struck him on the spot and ruined the party, quote unquote, he doesn't give in to whatever stuff, atmosphere and whatever. There are thousands and thousands of professing churches all over the world where their worship is an abomination to God. They think, oh, God is worshipped and all the offering and all that. Read Isaiah 1. God is actually disgusted. So just because it's so relevant, I ended up going there, but it's kind of tied to this whole situation. So now, verse 12, 2 Samuel 6:12. So it was told King David, saying, Yahweh has blessed the house of Obed-Edom and all that belongs to him because the ark of God, because the ark of God was there. So David went and brought up the ark of God from the house of Obed-Edom to the city of David with gladness, rejoicing. And so it was, when those bearing the ark of Yahweh had gone 6 paces, David, sacrificed oxen and fatted sheep. Then David danced before Yahweh with all his might. And David was wearing a linen ephod. So David and all the house of Israel brought up the ark of Yahweh with shouting and with the sound of the trumpet. So David learned his lesson, and if you actually read like First Chronicles, you see that David gets this corrected of the whole way to move the ark to make sure things are done properly. And then interestingly, David, he kind of functions like a priest, like him sacrificing these things, and then wearing a linen ephod. And I believe that this is tied to Christ, the greater David. Just like how Jesus would be the Christ, prophet, priest, and king. David, it's very interesting, guys. Did you hear me? Prophet, priest, and king. David is king, right? And David actually functioned as a prophet too. I'm pretty sure in Acts, when Peter preaches, or Paul, they call David a prophet. And then David also, he kind of functioned like a priest. So he totally foreshadowed Christ, the greater David, the really anointed one. But yeah, so there's all this celebration here, verse 16. Now as the ark of Yahweh came into the city of David, Michal, Saul's daughter, looked through a window and saw King David leaping and dancing before Yahweh, and she despised him in her heart. So they brought the ark of Yahweh and set it in its place in the midst of the tent that David had erected for it. Then David offered burnt offerings and peace offerings before Yahweh. And when David had finished offering burnt offerings and peace offerings, he blessed the people in the name of Yahweh of hosts. Then he distributed among all the people, among the whole multitude of Israel, both men, women and men, to everyone a loaf of bread, a piece of meat, a cake of raisins, and all the people departed, everyone to his house. So there was all this celebration with this, rejoicing and celebration about God's presence coming into the city and things getting established. And, David, as we know, David was totally in love with God. He was devoted to God ever since he was young. And so this would have been one of the most exciting days of his life. I mean, without exaggeration. It may have been the most exciting day where God's presence, you read Psalm 27:4, one thing I have asked of the Lord that I will seek, that I may dwell in the house of Yahweh all the days of my life, to behold the beauty of the Lord and to inquire in his temple. David was all about God, his presence, because he loved him. And so this presence of God coming into his city, he's just dancing, he's jumping up and down. And all this celebration is ended. And then verse 20, then David returned to bless his household and Michal, the daughter of Saul. Okay, why does it say the daughter of Saul? Well, it's pointing that part out. It could have just said just her name, or Michal, his wife, David's wife, but it points out this aspect, the daughter of Saul. Michal, the daughter of Saul, came out to meet David and said, how the king of Israel honored himself today, uncovering himself today in the eyes of the maids of his servants, as one of the base fellows or foolish ones shamelessly uncovers himself. So she totally just showed some serious disrespect and just, spoke in this kind of way. And so David said to Michal, what does it say right there? This is key. I had it highlighted a long, long time ago. David's response is, it was before Yahweh. That is the key of keys. It was before Yahweh, who chose me instead of your father and all his house, to appoint me ruler over the people of Yahweh, over Israel. I will celebrate before Yahweh, and I will be even more undignified, or many translations for this, undignified, lightly esteemed, or contemptible than this, and I will be humble in my own sight. But as for your maidservants of whom you have spoken, by them I will be held in honor. Michal, the daughter of Saul, had no children to the day of her death. This is pretty huge here. This is quite huge. See, it's all about before God. See, when it comes to David, him dancing, jumping up and down, just celebrating like this, what got him to celebrate like this? He only had one being in mind, his God, who's everything to him. And so he had one thing in mind, God, his presence is coming into my city near me. And so with that one thing, he was just so excited, and just, even in a shameful manner, in a way, just rejoicing. And this Michal, she totally despises him. Now, already the situation wouldn't have been good with her and David, because, she was given over to some other man to marry, and then David brought her back. But with the whole issue of, her dad was Saul, and, that dynasty ended, And so it's kind of like this dad and then husband, this thing where now this husband is king, but his line, her line, original line of Saul, it's all demolished and it's ended. But just she totally like looks down on David, and it is somewhat understandable because he was just jumping up and down and all that stuff in a shameless manner. But the key thing is this, that when it comes to our worship, not only our worship, but our whole lives, the one key thing is it's about what God thinks and God being the center. In this situation, because God was the only being in David's mind, he rejoiced in like a, kind of going past the line, almost going beyond celebration, but which looked bad. But the key thing is, like I read in verse 21, it was before Yahweh. And so sometimes when we're serving God in certain situations, we might look, we'll look dumb to people, the way we live. I mean, this is just how it's going to be with God's people in the new covenant. When it comes to how we live our lives, we end up living a life where we get persecuted, where we don't have much possessions, on, and other people look down on us. It just doesn't matter, because it's all about God. He's my audience. He's the only one that matters. When it comes to like the worshiping, I know there's a wide range, because depending on the context, the culture, the time period. When you go to places in Africa, I don't know if you've seen it, but many times when there's worshiping, there's much dancing and the type of music and things like that. Versus in the Western side and other places, most of the times there's no dancing. But what's important is not whether you dance or not or whatever. The number one issue is, the key issue is, your audience is not people. It's just God. He's the one you have in mind as you're worshiping. As you're singing those songs, the lyrics, you're thinking about your God and His work. And sometimes you can be off on your note or whatever. Once in a while, this happens. I might see like a younger person or older person where they don't sing well. Their note can be off. Their beat can be off. But see, in those situations, when somebody despises them, when someone looks down on them, they're doing exactly what Migal did. As long as their heart before God, it's just with worship, that's the only thing that matters. Yeah, any thoughts, anything? We got to see this chapter here. I know we only covered one chapter, but there's just so much here. A lot of different things. From them not following the law, this sad thing happened with Uzzah getting killed. There are issues where God is very clear on things. Other things where He's lenient. You have to know when it's like this, when it's like that. David's anger is not against God. David knows better. May we have a proper understanding of this thing, knowing God correctly. And the fact that whatever atmosphere, God's not going to give in to it, and He's not going to become all whatever. God is very firm on certain things. That if there's total corruption in the professing church, it doesn't matter if they have all these songs and whatever. God can be. He would actually prefer don't gather to worship me. We saw Isaiah 1. It's an abomination to Him. So it's not about whether you can get together once a week and sing. It's Monday through Saturday. How are those days? Because if those days you're living a wicked life unbiblically, then God would actually have you just don't meet. I don't want you to meet. But how many professing churches are there where it's exactly Isaiah 1? And the worshiping, we saw the dancing, celebrating. The audience is God, and He's the only one that matters. And so I'll pray, and we'll be praying. So Lord God, thank you for all these things that we can see in your word. Lord God, how you are the center, your presence, why David was so full of excitement. Undoubtedly, one of the most exciting days of his life, your presence. May we long for your presence, may we know your presence, and may we know you correctly, and offer proper worship before you. And may you be pleased, because you are the only one audience that actually matters. Thank you for this time. In Jesus' name, amen.